next panel is here to discuss how leaders can make fintech more inclusive. I'd like to welcome our next panelist, starting us off, co-founder of Rapunzel. Please welcome Miles Gage. Joining Miles is founder and CEO at UNES. Please say hello to Sena Udina. Following Sena is eToro's own Lule Demese. Let's hear it for Lule. And our moderator for today's discussion, Benzinga's Renato Chapo.
All right. How are you guys today?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, great. It's our second day. So today's panel is titled, Here's How Leaders Can Make FinTech More Inclusive. Our initial moderator isn't going to be here today, but I'll be asking his questions instead. So in terms of, let's just kick it off, I guess. Are there communities that remain underrepresented in FinTech, and why may that be the case?
Are there communities that remain underrepresented in
Yes.
FinTech?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, so just to introduce myself, Lule Demese, US CEO of eToro. We're a FinTech platform that provides investment services on a variety of assets, including options, stocks, ETFs, and crypto. And we're really excited to be part of the company, one of the companies in the struggle to try to create more access to regular people when it comes to investing landscape. And so the question of like, are there communities? Absolutely. And I think that this is not going to be a destination, but a journey. And I think the fight is not about whether we get to that destination, but to make sure that we're guarding with absolute zealous vengeance the ability to get there. And so how does that happen is, to my mind, guys, it would be an interesting conversation for us, but the communities that I think that are not being accessed by FinTech, and FinTech is a wide variety, right? I represent the investing lane, but there's the banking lane, there's other elements of it. I think the challenge for the communities that don't get access is really the digital nativity part of it, right? Like, what are the communities that get access from becoming more digital natives to be able to access these services? I think we have made major strides in the last 10 plus years because of the fact that smartphones have become prolific everywhere, from Burkina Faso to South Africa to Alabama, right? And so I think the strides cannot be underappreciated in the fact that the smartphone is the place to go. So I think the representation, in my opinion, for FinTech now is not just about the reach of those markets, because reach has had a huge stride these last 10 years. It's actually those people becoming part of the building circle. That, I think, is the big milestone. That's the milestone that I think is important for us to face, is sort of how to make what we build also be the builders that are consuming these products. So that means, who are the developers, who are the product managers, who are the people that are actually designing these things, and do they represent these now outsized reach of communities that we've had?
Got it. Sena, sorry, introduce yourself and
Sure. Ksenia Udina, CEO and founder of UNES. So UNES is a fintech app. It's a platform that helps parents invest and save for their kids' future and involve communities like friends and family to gift into the child's account. Our mission is actually to democratize access to financial services for families. And I completely agree that a lot of communities are still not engaged and involved in fintech as we know it. In my mind, the biggest reason for that is education, right? Financial literacy in this country is so low, it's embarrassing. Like 90% of people don't have access to financial advisors. If I speak specifically about my industry, 70% of people don't even know about the right ways to save for their kids' future, about right custodial accounts. As a result, we have this, huge problem of student debt, like $1.8 trillion student debt. Young people graduate into adult life burdened with, all kinds of debt, student debt, credit card debt, and so on. So that's what we are trying to fix with our platform.
Okay, Miles, introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Miles, and I'm the co-founder of Rapunzel Investments, and we are a digital financial education solution. So we have a mobile platform that allows individuals to create simulated stock portfolios with 10,000 fictional dollars, and we're launching our web-based platform too. But in addition to that, we built out a full financial education curriculum too that's also digitally accessible. But to the point about do we feel like there are communities that are excluded? I think a lot of it really just comes from the education piece, and that's just echoing the sentiment from my fellow panelists. But I think it's just a matter of how are we educating the next generation of leaders about not only financial education products, but these concepts for them to be able to consume these products down the line. And I think it just comes down to the intentionality of how we are directing or how we're marketing, but then also the decision makers that are also in these rooms that are creating these products, as was also just said earlier.
Okay, thank you. David wasn't able to join us today, but I actually interviewed all of you at a certain point at Benzinga. But one thing, we had a conversation, I think it was last year, and we were talking about how do you discover those communities that maybe are not represented, right, or you're not reaching, right? So, how do you discover them? How do you discover, how to maybe provide solutions for them that that they can accept and that they're able to better engage with and trust? Given that technology is matured enough where you don't need billions maybe to make those differences to reach those communities and so on. You want to start off?
Yeah. So I think the trick, at least that I've seen, is that you cannot discover that with a group full of like 8 people that make up the minds of billions of users and millions of users of these products and services, not necessarily for our company, but just in general. Yeah. So I think you have to untap the network effect, right? And realize that really the genius is going to come from people who use it and give you feedback on how it works. I do think, again, representation matters, both in the room of the people that end up designing it, whether it's positioning the product, talking about a product. But I think at the end of the day, your ecosystem has to be designed where the network effect is giving you feedback. So I'll give you an example. For eToro, education is a central premise of everything we do. So when you come on our website, the first thing you get to have is a virtual portfolio, because we actually believe that learning by doing is the most magical place to gain knowledge, right? And so once you do learning by doing, there's also what we have is a social feed. And our social feed, our usership is like something like 30 million users globally, 100 countries. And that gives you an entire planet to juice that network effect insight from. And those people give us feedback all the time. And our roadmaps and products are designed, informed by those things as well. And so I think the key is going to be knowing that no one individual in this planet is going to know the answer. And so how do you harness that network effect to be able to get that intelligence into your product development, your positioning, and everything else, I think is going to be central.
Okay, thank you. Sana?
Sure. So I think like the beauty of fintech is that we can solve a lot of those problems through technology, right? By making products, financial products more affordable, meaning like anyone can afford and don't have hire expensive financial advisor, making financial products accessible, mobile technology, anyone can download the app and get started in 5 minutes, and by making it easy to use so people don't feel like they're overwhelmed, it only takes 5 minutes. So I think fintech has a great power to empower people and make it accessible to a wide range of population. And specifically to us, like one interesting thing about UNet's platform is that like early on, fintech was a little bit, at least consumer fintech was a little bit skewed towards men, like trading platforms, investing products. 90% were, of the early adopters were men. With UNES, we have pretty much 50-50% split, which is amazing because we combine this idea of it's not just about your money, it's about your children, right? So for any parent, like regardless of gender, right? Like it's the kids are important.
Gotcha. Miles?
All right, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. So how do you discover, what the problems are, or how to reach those underrepresented communities, and how do you solve or build solutions, given that maybe you don't need billions to build these technologies?
Yeah, I think for me personally, just growing up on the South Side of Chicago, I was not say a part of the problem, but I think I saw a lot of where the disconnect came from. So I think my perspective was like, how am I reaching other people that may look like me or may come from similar backgrounds? So the way we approached that was trying to speak the language and really being in those spaces that people from diverse backgrounds occupy. So I think that's kind of the mindset, but I don't think that if you grew up or if you didn't grow up in these environments or around those environments, how would you know to think like that? And it's like, it's no one's fault. But I think it takes that whole diversity of thought and diverse leaders to be able to create and bring these ideas to the table. So we are approaching it from different angles and not just thinking about it from one vantage or from one person or one group of people's perspective.
Thank you. You made a really good point about kind of the social community that you have. And I think one thing that was clearly visible, especially last year and maybe the year before, kind of the whole meme stock movement. But I think that was a display of, people's, trust from themselves, their trust of their embedded networks and so on, and maybe their distrust of, institutions and so on, right? And so do you think bringing in these communities and trying to build these communities on brokerage platforms and so on, that is a way to rebuild that trust and, foster engagement and so on?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. We are living in an era where trust has been sort of burst, right, a little bit. And trust is it's an ephemeral thing, right? And in some ways, I think what we are living through is a reconstruction of systems that really have a trust but verify model. And so part of that is regulation, for sure, right? But part of it is creating infrastructures that keep good hygiene. And what I mean by that is, as we all know, whether it's governments or public life or whatever the case may be, transparency is the best anesthetic for being able to create trust, right? And so what I think about these, either whether you have a social platform that is open, like for instance, in our social platform, you can't participate if you're going to be not public as an identity, right? You have to be a public persona on the platform to partake in the social. So I think part of it is making sure that we all, both as individuals who partake in that social network, as well as people who are the guardians of it, if you will, in our construct being the eToro is the guardian of that social power, that the transparency is constantly the central premise and thesis of it. And I think when we do that, what we realize is that it's not that humans don't err. They make mistakes. They will make mistakes. That'll never change. But ultimately, the light is what essentially allows us to quickly fix those things, right? And so I do think that having a platform on our system, we are a multi-regulated platform, right? Yeah. We have a broker service. We have all sorts of regulators, states. And so having that be in that sandbox allows us to create a construct, not that different from a constitution for a country, right? Yeah. Where ultimately, where you can create engagement of transparency, which then fosters a healthier system that then can engender trust. Not that it doesn't make mistakes, but that it engenders trust.
Gotcha. Miles, you want to come and help in here?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the whole trust aspect, I think it comes down to the engagement piece. And I guess the stakeholders include the end users on the platform. So if they don't feel like you have their best interest in mind, then we're ultimately going to go in the loop and we're not actually going to make strides forward. So it just comes down to making sure that people feel like they are included. And I think that it just comes down to making sure that I feel like not necessarily a broken record, but it's making sure that these people's voices are heard. And I think that type of engagement allows us to keep having progress.
Zena, would you like to comment?
Well, if you talk about fintech and trust, I just want to get to the point of like FTX and crypto, right? Because crypto is being built on the promise of making fintech more inclusive and providing more differentiated financial solutions in hands of different people. I think it comes down to regulation, right? More regulation, building the credibility in the system. So other companies like us who also actually trying to use crypto as one of the tools to make fintech more inclusive and not facing this risk of mistrust from the public.
Okay, gotcha. Now, eToro is a large organization, and Rapunzel is, a little bit smaller, right? But I think one thing that you guys can both agree on is kind of the whole education aspect of it. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, and you went in depth. Do you want to talk a little bit about how maybe an eToro approaches education specifically more, and we'll kind of go on from there?
Yeah, so there's several ways we approach education. So one is the central premise of it, which is make sure the system is simple. And simple is not stupid. Simple takes a lot of work to do. And so make it simple. Like, there is no glory. I think some of the things that I think has been frustrating, I've been in the financial industry for over almost 20 years now. And I just remember the vitriol of thinking that we had complex language, complex systems, and that was what made us smart. And I'm like, no, when I would break it down, I would be like, no, all you did is just put a lot of gunk on something that's like your 1 + 1, right? And so I think simplicity and reaching for simplicity is a central mechanism to invite people to actually engage. So that's the first thing, whether it's simplicity of design, simplicity of approach, simplicity of language, etc. Mm-hmm. The second is constructing a mechanism that is a learning by doing. There is no learning without doing. I fundamentally believe that, and eToro's entire platform is designed around that. So when you go on a platform and you practice on our platform with virtual dollars, you are practicing on our platform. Yeah. But you're not putting capital at risk, right? But you're seeing the moments of ups and downs of whatever asset that you buy. Mm-hmm. So we give you $100,000 of fake money, if you will, of virtual money, and you're seeing over time what those bumps and circles, and then we know there's no learning without crisis. And so you're seeing the ups and downs, and you're course correcting as you go. So the second is learn by doing. So the entire platform is designed for you to be able to be in the virtual environment before you go, if you choose to, before you go into the real environment. And if you're ready to go to the real environment, you can. And the third element of it is education that is joyful, that is inviting, right? I think that it's important that we don't make education feel like boiled vegetables, right? Like, nobody wants that, right? Yeah. So education that is joyful, that is interesting, that is concise and simple, but that is representative. We can only do what we see. And so for us, it's really important the people that are teaching look like the people that we're also trying to bring into the tent. And that's important. Representation matters. So those are some of the three major tenets of how we approach education.
How about Rapunzel?
I really like that analogy of the boiled vegetables. And I think what we try to do at Rapunzel is add a little bit of seasoning and flavor to financial education, because, I mean, learning about financial concepts is not the most glamorous or exciting stuff. So it's like, how do you get people to be excited about that? So for us, when we were thinking about Rapunzel, we wanted to create a simulator and allow people to engage with financial markets, because you can't just teach someone about the stock market in a textbook. That's not exciting. They need to be able to do it. So it's like, let them practice in the simulated environment, right? And then how do we make it exciting? Like, let's add a competition component to it. So as you're learning about this, let's just say that you win our competition, you may get a scholarship. That's going to be exciting and is going to probably pique the students or the person's curiosity to go down this rabbit hole a little bit further and learn about these concepts. But then, in addition to the simulated aspect, we have this full financial education curriculum. And, we didn't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel, because you can only teach about, building a balanced stock portfolio or learning about mortgages a certain way. But as my partner, Brian, and I, who's in the room, we were thinking about it. We're like, okay, we've been immersed in finance our whole lives. So the way that we explain this is going to go over a lot of people's heads. So to your point about, you have to simplify it. So what we did when we were building out our curriculum, we actually worked with a group of high school students in New York and had them kind of review it and to ultimately, not to say dumb it down, but make it accessible for a middle schooler to be able to pick this up. And if they can get it, then anyone can. So we had them critique our work as we edited and fine-tuned the curriculum, because ultimately these were going to be some of the people that were going to use it. And if it's just designed by some people that have spent their entire lives in finance, it's not ultimately going to get over to them. It's going to go over their head. So again, it has to be simplified, and it still has to be tasty and flavorful for someone to really digest the concepts and implement and integrate that into their daily lives.
How does Eunice approach education?
So first of all, I totally agree with my fellow panelists about simplicity. It's a key. So we also strive to break down the complex financial model concepts into very simple language. Second, it's digital. So we're trying to reach our audience through digital means. We have UNEST Learn section in the app. It's a blog about like different financial concepts, credit cards, student debt, savings accounts, investing accounts, social media, blogs, emails, right? So it's not about textbooks anymore. No one wants to read, long chapters. It's about breaking it down, making it accessible and digital. And the last piece I would say, it's also connecting kind of parents and kids, right? Like we need to start early. We need to educate the young generation. So when they reach this age of 18, when they actually can start investing with real money, they know and they don't make costly mistakes.
Got it. I really appreciate your comment about like the learn by doing. Thinking back, kind of like the whole meme stock thing or whatever. I mean, you could have read every single textbook on, derivatives pricing or whatever, and you saw what happened with like GameStop, where vols went up to 100, and the right move was to buy vol and not sell it, right? Because we're soon running out of time, the one thing that you mentioned at the start of the conversation was kind of the whole thing about the culture, like having a really good culture and how that kind of is representative of the communities that you're also trying to represent and build solutions for. So you want to talk a little bit about, how eToro approaches culture. I was talking to some of your colleagues in the back and they were raving about you. So tell me a little bit about that.
So just, I think the reason I got so attracted to joining eToro is because I felt like the company had the same sort of spirit, which is, I often refer to myself as a happy warrior.
Okay.
And so the culture that I think we try to strive for is a culture that celebrates different voices. I mean, you can't be in 100 countries and not have different voices in the room. It's an impossible equation.
Sure.
And so different voices and getting used to sort of having a cacophony of voices, of like having different opinions and not taking that personally, but actually enjoying the debate that happens by, if you're going to have representation, by definition, that means there are going to be many more opinions in the room. Mm-hmm. And so you have to create an infrastructure in your culture that turns that into an asset rather than sort of a rivalry, right? So part of it is also creating the muscle of knowing how to turn that diverse perspective into a synthesized it. Whatever that it is. And so one is really sort of making sure that there are many people, different types of voices and ideas. The second is creating the cultural infrastructure for that to turn into an asset. Mm-hmm. And the third is that happy part of that warrior, right? Resiliency, like happiness, and that being able to be a happy warrior, especially in the time we're living in now. Create that resiliency is something that people will have with them, whether they stay with you forever or they leave you. Yeah. And it's a very important ingredient. And I think this time is teaching us that is the thing that is going to make the difference. And eToro really, that's the North Star of eToro, is a bunch of happy warriors.
Zaina, do you have anything to do you agree with Lule? Or?
I totally agree with that. Speaking of culture, I think all of us are trying to achieve a very inclusive culture. The way we do it at UNEST is we're making our product accessible to parents of all income levels and economic backgrounds. And we're trying to involve community. I think, it takes a village to get people started with their financial kind of lives. So that's why we making sure friends and grandparents and, all family members are involved in this process of saving and educating kids.
Right. And so just piggybacking off of that, I think the culture, what we've tried to do is create a culture of inclusivity and community. We encourage people or our stakeholders to challenge some of the things, but it's also a safe space for us to create a collaborative, learning and working environment. But then as far as our programming goes, it's we try to engage all levels of the people we're impacting, whether it's stakeholders that are sponsoring an event or it's the students that are participating. We're trying to bridge these different gaps and show that there is a sense of community, because I think that that's something that has lacked in fintech, or maybe just in financial services in general, is community, where it feels like someone that may not be a part of this group can actually be a part of this group. So we want for people to feel like they belong there. And that's our biggest thing. And I mean, the name Rapunzel comes from the fact that people view the world of investing and the returns of Wall Street as something that's inaccessible to most people. So we're rolling down that hair to provide equitable access to financial markets and the returns of Wall Street.
Got it. Okay. Give her hands up for our participants today. And thank you so much for attending.
You did a great job sitting in.
Yeah, you did.
I was a little nervous at the beginning. I'm sorry.